Welcome to Lessons from Production, the podcast where we dive into behind the scenes stories of building and scaling real world software systems. I'm your host, and today we're excited to be joined by Mark, Chief Architect at Checkmarx. In this episode, we're talking about navigating the intersection of security, speed, and scale in modern software development. From scaling systems to meet massive demand, improving scan success rates through data-driven approaches, and accelerating delivery with GitOps and automation, we're unpacking the practices and lessons that have shaped Checkmarx's engineering journey. If you're curious about how leading teams are embedding security into their workflows without slowing down innovation, you're in the right place. With that, let me hand it over to Mark to introduce himself and get us started.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark and I'm Chief Architect in Checkmarx. I'm responsible for technical agenda, basically overseeing the entire engineering and technical features that we are developing in Checkmarx. I'm passionate about technology, architecture, security, and during my career, I was undergoing through technical and leadership roles and the combination of them. So yeah, this is me.
Amazing. Great to have you on the show, Mark. Looking forward to speaking more with you. Before we get started, do you mind telling our audience a little bit more about your company? Like, what does Checkmarx do?
Right. So in Checkmarx, we are developing application security testing tools. We have a platform which is called Checkmarx One. Basically, this platform aggregates various security features and capabilities into one single stop shop where we are adding more and more integrated tools for developers, for DevOps, and of course for CISOs that overseeing the entire security roadmap of the companies. And we have tools like static code analysis, software composition analysis, dynamic application security testing, and other tools that comprise our platform. And that's what we do in Checkmarx.
All right, so let me show you a real world example of using Checkmarx. So I'm going to use VS Code and just going to install the extension. As you can see, I already have it installed. After installing, you just go to your settings and add in your Checkmarx One API key. When you sign up, you can just find that in your dashboard. You also need to add the API key to connect to OpenAI. Now this is used because let's say Checkmarx is going to tell me, hey Kunal, there's this thing that is wrong. This is how you fix it. So that's why it needs OpenAI. I'm just going to add in my project. This is a sample project that I have. It's going to show up over here and just which branch I am on. So I'm on the develop branch. I can scan my local branch as well, but for now I'm going to be here. Cool. So that way you can test out what other people are working as well. This is a scan that has already been run. I'm going to hide the other sections. So here you can see it's saying that we have some critical issues, some medium level issues, and here you can see where the issue is, the file. So general information, description, an example of how to fix it. Now the examples are not really based on this specific code, but for that we can use the AI security champion. Let's take a look at this critical SQL injection. So here you can learn about which file the issue was on. So here you can see it's the login controller.cs file, generally what the issue is, description like what is the risk, how can an attacker use this issue, what caused this issue, that's already mentioned also over here, and some general recommendations. These are some of the remediation examples. Now this is not specific to the code I have written. It's just in general example of how to fix it. This is saying that I'm not going to install anything else. So yeah, this is saying this is the file in which you have the error. Obviously, if you go down the call stack, you just go down a little bit more, you'll see the exact function where this error was, and we can see it's in the login function over here. So this function has the error. It's causing SQL injection. Now, for this specific code, if I want an answer, I can just go to AI security champion. It's going to use the OpenAI key. I just click, give me an answer, and it's given me an answer over here. As you can see, I'm using dark mode, but that's going to be updated very soon. So you can use light mode or just update your IDE and the extension. So you can see it's giving me the explanation, the proposed remediation, and it has actually given me the exact code, like how I can fix this. So it's given me the code to fix my problem. the SQL injection error, vulnerability. So I'm just going to copy that code and I'm going to paste it over here. This is my bad function, the one with errors, and well, not really error, but like bad security practice. And I've pasted the one that Checkmarx has given me. After this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the scan again. So click on this play button. It's going to run the scan again. That's fine. It's okay. I'm going to scan it anyway. Preparing files for scan, as you can see in the below, and scan running. So that should take like a few minutes, not too much. I can actually show you the logs as well. If I open up my terminal, so I go here, new terminal, in the output, I can just select Checkmarx. Should be here somewhere, there you go. So you can see the logs as well, like what happens and everything. Okay, so you can see scan is running and here scan is finished. It says, do you want to load the results? Yep, it's going to load my results. And SQL injection vulnerability that was giving me like as a sort of like warning, it's gone now. So you can see that's gone. And I can take a look as well in the new scans. There are some other things that it is asking me to fix, but you can see the one for SQL injection is gone because we fixed it. And that's how, from code to production or from code to cloud, it can fix it. You can also self-host it yourself. But yeah, that's how you can maintain and ensure code quality while you're coding before it lands in production. So yeah, that was a quick little demo. On to the podcast. So Mark, before we started recording, we were talking about DevSecOps, right? And just how it's showing up more and more in real world development. From your perspective, what's the current state of DevSecOps? That's a tongue twister. DevSecOps right now. And how do you see it changing or adapting as teams try to balance moving fast with staying secure?
Yeah, so I think we are in the point where DevSecOps, the intersection between dev, operations, and security, it's already not some kind of checkbox that we need to tick. It became really an integral part of what we are doing as a developers at each and every stage of its life cycle. And the key change is that we have it integrated in the workflows and our daily routines, and it becomes de facto a part of what we are doing, right? It's not like we have security teams that bring sec part to it, or ops teams that bring operational aspects of it to our work. It's really the integration of it in our daily lives, and of course the cultural shift that allow this transformation to happen.
So Mark, I'm curious, what got your team started on the DevSecOps journey in the first place? Like, was there a specific moment or challenge that pushed you to rethink how security fits into development? And now that you've been through that shift, what are some of the key takeaways or lessons you're hoping to share with the folks who are listening today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a person that basically had those two heads of head of development on one side, where I was leading large development and R&D organization in Checkmarx in previous companies. And on the other side, I was acting as a chief architect responsible for architectural guidelines and best practices, including security aspects of it. I was basically looking into some good workflow, good process where the security didn't didn't interfere with ongoing development goals, where the velocity is the primary goal, where time to market is the primary goal, but really putting security into the place where it becomes the enabler rather to be a hurdle, rather to be something that developers are looking and doing only because they have to do it and not because they believe that they need to do it. So that's how I became really passionate about this intersection, this challenge, and started adoption of this cultural change in Checkmarx.
Amazing. So today we're talking about the three S's that every modern team, tech team is trying to balance. We're talking about speed, security, and scale. Let's actually start with scale, because that's pretty interesting. You know, every company hits that inflection point where things start growing faster than expected. Like traffic spikes, customer demand shoots up, and suddenly you're scrambling to keep up. What's the most dramatic example of scaling you've experienced in your career? A moment where you had to quickly adapt to a big jump in demand or complexity, and how did you and your team navigate that situation?
So, as far as I can see, most of the organizations are facing the same scaling challenges, right? How you take your current processes, how you take your current architecture and the current workloads, the number of users, number of requests, whatever architectural aspects we are talking about, and how you scale it to the larger number of customers, to the larger number of users in a way that you can do it in a sustainable manner. Those are, I would say, pervasive challenges, how you take some specific process that works for you and make it work for much higher speed, for much higher scale. So for us, our core functionality of our platform, which is called Checkmarx One, is to be able to scan source code, right? This is very core functionality that we need to provide to our customers. So when we grew with just a couple of hundred of customers to thousands of customers, this scaling functionality, this scanning functionality needed to be scaled out in a way that we can provide very good quality of service. We should make scanning to be very adjustable to the workload demands and basically provide quality of service to all of customers, because Checkmarx One and scaling is basically mission critical functionality for our customers. So when we started, we basically able to support around 1,000 and a half concurrent scans, and we needed to grow it to 30,000 concurrent scans. And that brought us very significant challenge from both operational perspectives and also architectural perspective. How we use cloud technologies, how we use existing architecture in a way that we can adjust it to the desired workload. And that's where we started. And our journey brought us to the place where we basically analyzed each and every bottleneck that we had in the system to understand how we can scale it out. So most of our workloads, they are dynamic workloads, but we still had some bottlenecks in a way we are processing the data, storing this data, and retrieving this data during the scan process. So we started basically optimizing our SQL and data processing and optimizing the way we are creating our dynamic workloads so we can raise the bar and make our concurrency support to be much higher and to be able to support this demand of multiple customers.
So, Mark, you mentioned the significant growth from 1,500 to 30,000 concurrent scans. So it's clear that your team had to overcome some technical challenges. And I noticed that you mentioned using Kubernetes event-driven autoscaling KEDA to scale your services. Can you elaborate on how you configured KEDA to handle the dynamic scaling, and what specific metrics or events triggered the scaling decisions?
So as I was mentioning, most of our workloads scan specifically, we are very dynamic. So if a scan request comes to the system, we know how to create a dynamic workload that takes up this scan, process it, and then continues to the new request. But some of our services contain a static number of replicas. So if I want to generate a report, I have specific number of replicas, specific number of instances that will process those requests. So we used KEDA in order to scale those services in a very dynamic manner, right? So we have multiple attributes, multiple metrics that we used based on which the KEDA was creating additional resources as needed. For example, it could be hardware metrics like CPU and memory, and it could be also our own custom metrics like the load on the database, like how many scans we have right now in the queue, and additional custom metrics that we are able to use to let Kida know that additional replicas and additional resources need to be created.
So, noting the importance of proactive monitoring in your story, your team must have had to invest significant time and effort into setting up and configuring your APM tooling. So, how did you ensure that your APM tooling was able to handle the increased load and provide meaningful insights into performance bottlenecks? And what specific APM features or configurations proved particularly useful?
Right. So from the APM instrumentation perspective, we are using basically OTel instrumentation, open telemetry instrumentation, where each of our services are reporting their core metrics to the central log management system, where we are monitoring things like error rates, things like latency, and the number of requests coming from the same service. And then those metrics, those APM metrics are used during, uh, of course, monitoring, right, by our operational teams. And also when we want to adjust kernel instrumentation, kernel logic based on those metrics, we use them extensively just to analyze and create dashboards on top of that. And those dashboards gave us this insight about where we need to put more emphasis. What are the resources that we need to scale based on the metrics that we are incoming to our Kibana dashboards, and we use them in KEDA as well, just to be able to adjust the configuration of KEDA for certain services that were responsible for scanning process in general. So that's how we use it in our case.
So, speaking of monitoring, your team must have had to invest significant time and effort into setting up and configuring monitoring tools. Can you discuss your approach to observability and monitoring in your production environment? And how do you use tools like Prometheus, Grafana, or New Relic to gain insights into system performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So in our case, we are using multiple tools for observability purpose and monitoring of production. First of all, from the standard tools perspective, we are using Prometheus and Grafana just to be able to get a standard hardware metrics, to be able to understand what is going on inside our Kubernetes cluster, what are the level of usage we have, if we have any pressure on some of our services. So those are core hardware metrics that we were using with Prometheus in Grafana. On top of it, we are using our own logs telemetry that is coming to Elasticsearch, and basically Kibana dashboards that we use just to be able to observe how the production environment are behaving. In addition to that, we have our own production monitoring tools. Basically, those tools, we call it sanity testing in production, because we understand that no matter how deeply we are testing our system before production in staging environments or maybe development environments, what happens in production due to its nature, due to its volume of the data, will only happen in production. So we created specific set of testing suites where we are exercising core functionality against the production system just to be able to understand if we have some kind of malfunctioning, and those tests are reporting. First of all, they are running periodically in the system, and we are reporting their statuses to our monitoring system, and we were getting alerts and being able to understand if the production behaves as expected or we have some kind of hiccups or malfunctioning and issues that we need to resolve. So this is the triangle of things that we are using. First of all, Prometheus and Grafana. Second, the ELK stack for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. And the third part of it, of this triangle, is our own sanity tools, our own production tools that we are using for monitoring and observability in general.
Amazing. So from that story, we learned that for scale, you need to be doing monitoring early, scaling dynamically, and always staying ahead of your infrastructure needs rather than catching up. But you also have to prioritize security, and that is the second segment of this podcast. So, how do you prioritize and address security vulnerabilities in your organization? And what strategies have you found to be most effective in reducing risk and improving overall security posture?
Yeah, during certifications, during improvement of our overall security posture, we found that looking into vulnerabilities already in the hindsight doesn't work for us because it's too late in the game, right? The security issues are already there. We need to create some kind of lessons learned and doing debriefs where the issues happened, why they happened, and resolve them already when it's too late in the game, right? Or when the system is already propagated through lower stages of its development to production environments. So we started with multiple strategies to shift it as left as possible in our case. First of all, we created a very large group, cross-organizational group of security champions, where each and every development team had the focal point, a security guy in his team, which is basically the engineer, the regular one, just people that really love dealing with security and helping other team members to handle security issues. So each and every development team has its own security champion, and this security guild of those champions is meeting once in a while, discussing different needs, discussing security assessments that they are doing in their team, just helping each other and understand and promote security resolution and expedite the fixing if needed. So this is the first part of it. The second part is basically eat our own champagne, right? As a security checkmark, as a security company, Checkmarx is developing security tools for developers. So first step for us was to use our own tools in our software development lifecycle. So we started gradually integrating Checkmarx One platform into our own development practices. So we started with integration of Checkmarx One plugins on the IDE side of the developers. So as a developer, I don't need to wait for my code to be pushed and analyzed by security tools later on, but I can really use security assessment as I write code, as I type it. So that's how I can resolve and also prevent those security vulnerabilities to happen in the first place. And the second stage of it was integrating of our own tools during merge request integration, during pull request integration. And we have very good native integration with our own tools. So we started using it during committing our code to SCMs, to the code repositories, and basically breaking the builds, breaking the merges of our code if this code contains security vulnerabilities. And we are talking about the comprehensive usage of almost all our tools, right? If we want to scan infrastructure as code, if we want to scan our regular code with static code analysis, or even doing software composition analysis for open source packages that we are using within the organization. So we started using those tools, and since it became an integral part of our own work, we slowly saw the shift from reactive security issues handling by proactive, where our own tools help us to do it in a much more structured way, and of course in a much more proactive way.
That is interesting, the significant improvement in scan success rates. So, your team's focus on data driven decision making must have played a crucial role. And you mentioned using clear metrics and daily stand ups to identify and resolve issues. So, ideally, can you walk me through an example of how you used data to drive a specific improvement? And also, what technical changes were made as a result of that?
Yeah, so the next step from our perspective was introduction of, as we call it, security gates, right? Because not all vulnerabilities, they are equal. Some of them maybe not exploitable. Some of them are more critical than others. And we all know the stories about high or critical vulnerabilities that are being published each and every day. So one of the processes that we implemented based on the data that we are getting from our own platform is implementation of those security gates based on the severity type of the same vulnerabilities. So when the security issue is found, the system is automatically creates the Jira ticket with all relevant information attached to it, and this Jira ticket becomes a part of definition of done of the same team, of the same epic to be handled before they are able to basically to promote this feature to more production state, to market its definition of that. So implementation of these security gates based on actual exposure, actual impact of security issues that our platform is finding was one of the examples when we used data-driven approach and created a robust process that allow us not to lose speed on one side and on the other side to handle security issues and improve our own security posture in general.
So, what about security testing? It must have played a critical role in ensuring the integrity of your scans. What specific security testing methodologies or tools do you use to identify and remediate vulnerabilities? And how do you integrate security testing into your overall testing strategy?
So from the tooling perspective, we should start from basics, right? Static code analysis of our own code. Being able to analyze what we are writing as we are writing this code is one of the primary steps. So tools like SaaS tools that we are developing internally in Checkmarx and analyzing open source packages just to understand the risk that those packages could bring to us, and maybe license risk that we may have as a part of using the same packages. This is the start. Later on, we are using other tools like container scanning just to be able to understand that images that we are using, they are good base images that provide us with the good security posture, and we can use it in our development practices. So container scanning could be another step where we are verifying that the sources and the packages that we are using, those are good to go packages for us to use. And then, of course, we have additional checkpoints where we need to make sure that as many phases as possible in the software development lifecycle are secured. For example, if we build our own images and we push them into packages repositories like JFrog and like Artifactory and others, we need to make sure that we are signing our own images and containers just to make sure that no one will be able to exercise supply chain attacks and inject unsigned and maybe malicious images and packages into our repositories. So those are examples of using multiple tools across different phases of software development lifecycle. And of course, we can also talk about dynamic application security testing, where we already deployed our application and we want to exercise some kind of pen testing to see if we have vulnerabilities and security issues that we need to fix once the system already deployed. So I think the key here is to use as many tools as possible and make those tools to be directly integrated into day-to-day developer practices and developer workflows.
So there is a potential here for DevSecOps practices to improve scan success rates. Have you explored ways to shift security left in your development process? How do you integrate security into your development workflow? And are there any specific DevSecOps practices or any tools that you use to improve the security and quality of your code?
I think the ultimate intersection, the key, I would say, insight to make it as streamlined as possible is to bring security tools much closer to the places where developers live, right? So if I'm writing the code, I need security tools close to my IDE and my editors that I'm using for that purpose. If I'm using SCM systems like GitLab, or whatever, I want those security tools to be close to the SCM. If I use CI/CD systems like Circle CI or other systems, I want security tools to be part of those processes and exercise security testing during building of my packages. If I deploy my system to the production environment, I just want to make sure that once deployed, my images and my artifacts are assessed for additional vulnerabilities that I may have, right? So application security posture in general, this is a sequence of tooling and tools that I can use across all of those checkpoints of the software development lifecycle. And as we were mentioning previously, the key idea is basically to use the intersection of all of those tools on one side to be able to scale, as we said, and on the other side to make the security aspects to be an enabler, or rather something that I just deal because I have to deal with that. So integration and automation is the key to handle DevSecOps right. And the second, as we were talking and mentioning previously, it's a cultural change. We need to make it an ongoing way of doing things. The culture of our development teams should be tuned and should be very aligned with the security practices in general, and that's how I think we should do it right.
I love that you mentioned about the culture as well. And since we're talking about security and testing, what about chaos engineering or resilience testing to validate system resilience? Have you explored these techniques to further improve the system reliability? And chaos engineering, we know it's not directly related to security, but still, what role does it play in your overall testing strategy? And do you use any tools that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, one of the practices that we were looking into is chaos engineering, right? Chaos engineering is not directly related to security, but it gives us another level of visibility of what could happen if we have quality issues in production or we have security issues in production that directly affect the production stability, right? As we said, many times the systems that we are developing, they are mission critical for our customers. So exercising practices like chaos engineering, just to be able to understand what would happen if we have certain parts of the system failing and how the system will react in this case to regular bugs, to some overloaded conditions, or even security issues is very critical just to make sure that our system is redundant enough, is robust enough to be able to react to those conditions and still provide adequate service of level to our customers. So I strongly support exercising those exercises, exercising those practices in production, and chaos engineering is one of them.
So, from our conversation, the key takeaways for security would be targeted efforts by dedicated teams can dramatically increase impact. And it's not just about tools, it's about people and the culture as well. Now, let's talk about the last segment, speed. What are some of the biggest bottlenecks or pain points you've encountered in your software delivery pipeline? And how have you used automation and other strategies to accelerate time to market and improve overall efficiency? Would you like to share a story?
Absolutely. So many challenges that I think many organizations are facing, despite the development of practices like DevOps and DevSecOps, is the fact that this intersection is not, those practices are not implemented right in many organizations. And we weren't be an exception from this rule. we had a central team, which is called DevOps team, that was responsible for almost 80-90% of the operational overhead. So if we want to basically to deploy something to production, we need DevOps team. If we want to fix security issue, we need DevOps team. If I want developer environment for me to be able to test my changes, we need DevOps team. And then we realized that despite the fact that they are called to be DevOps, actually those are operations teams, not DevOps teams. Because on one side, we had development team, on the other side, we had DevOps team, and the interactions between them were pretty close to what we call the wall of confusion, right? One of the teams or dev teams were throwing their issues over the fence to DevOps teams and vice versa. And when we had some production issue in the middle of night, it was very difficult to understand how to handle it because it's very difficult in modern applications where we have hundreds of services, and when some service fails, you need to be very clear about why it failed and who needs to fix it. So we analyzed where we stand. We did many lessons learned. We did many debriefs. And then we understood that we are just not doing it right. We call it DevOps, but it's really the dev and the ops. So one of the steps to resolve this issue was to give our development teams the power and, of course, the responsibility to do their own continuous integration and deployment practices. And that's where we started the shift of providing our development teams the tools and the processes and the practices just to be able to integrate their changes and deploy their changes on a continuous manner. And that's where we started using tools like Argo CD for them to be able to continuously deliver value to our customers and reduce the cycle time and, of course, reduce the time to market.
You mentioned Argo CD for declarative deployments. Can you elaborate on how you defined your application configurations and workflows in Argo CD? And what specific features or plugins have you used to customize the deployment process?
Yeah, so customizing deployment process and creating deployment process with Argo CD for our development teams was intersection and combined work of our DevOps teams that we started calling in the right name, platform engineering. So they created tools together with development teams just to be able to create very customized experience for each and every development team, right? So our platform engineering teams were analyzing their workloads depending on the team, depending on the technology that each team is using. Relevant plugins and relevant processes were introduced by the DevOps team together with the dev team, but it's really being able to closely collaborate between platform engineering team and the dev teams to create customized experience of continuous integration and deployment practices for each and every team. So right now, most of our teams are using Argo CD for ongoing deployments of their code. And depending on the technology, depending where their services are plugged into the system, they are using specific tools and specific metrics and specific versioning practices just to make sure that we are giving them the solutions that they need for them to be successful in their CI/CD processes.
So let's talk about GitOps and infrastructure as code, two things that have become pretty foundational in modern deployment strategies. And what role does GitOps play in how you approach deployments overall? And when it comes to managing and versioning infrastructure configurations, how do you make sure that it stays reliable and consistent at scale? I know Argo CD plays a role there, but can you walk us through how you're using it to manage and version your infrastructure setups?
So yeah, everything in our case is fully automated. We don't have manual processes at the moment. Manual changes are strictly prohibited and we are not using them. So we are using CloudFormation, we are using Terraform and other infrastructure as code practices like AWS CDK. It could be any other tools that our teams found as useful for us. And yeah, the GitOps model is basically for us is using things like Kubernetes operator and declarative way of specifying things, configuring our services together with Argo CD, just to make sure that what we have running on our production is really the changes in the code that we are developed, that we don't have any drifts from what we intended to have on production, and GitOps is very helpful for us to just to make sure that our workloads are basically adjustable to what we planned to have on production. And again, Kubernetes operator, GitOps, Argo CD, standard tooling, automation, infrastructure as code, those are tools and practices that we are using during delivery and deployment of our systems to production.
We spoke about security in the previous section. So my question is, how do you integrate security into your CI/CD pipeline, and what specific DevSecOps tools or practices do you use to improve the security and quality of your deployments?
So integration of security tools into CI/CD pipelines, we are doing it with our own native tools. Checkmarx One has very extensive set of integrations and APIs that we can use. One of the very convenient tooling that we are using as a part of Checkmarx One is Checkmarx One CLI that gives our developers and DevOps team this nice ability to interact with Checkmarx One platform by using this CLI. And again, the integration might look as very simple, taking the merge request, taking the change set, sending it for scanning to Checkmarx One, using multi-engine scan that we have available in Checkmarx One, basically scanning the same change set with multiple tools and engines, as we call it, and just getting the results, breaking the builds as a part of specific policy rules that we have. For example, if we find high critical vulnerabilities, the build is failing, and we just basically block propagation of the same change set to the later stages of the development life cycle. But yes, those are our own tools, and we use almost all of our capabilities during CI/CD integrations and security assessment in general.
So, given the trade-off between speed and stability in deployments, how do you balance these competing priorities carefully? And what specific metrics or KPIs do you use to evaluate success of your deployments?
So if we are talking about the trade-off between speed and stability, or speed and security, I think there are metrics that may help us to integrate it in a much more streamlined fashion. One of those metrics could be DORA metrics that were introduced by Google some time ago, and we can use those DORA metrics as a part of our deployment efficiency assessment, ongoing one, right? So I think one of the key promises of continuous integration and continuous delivery practices is to be able to deliver small incremental changes. And if our changes are small and we are exercising and looking into metrics like DORA metrics, that we can understand that the stability and speed, they do not contradict each other. On the contrary, we want to be able to assess our code with automated tools in a way that it promotes speed instead of impeding it. So it's really about how we look into stability, how we look into security, and it could be either something that we confront or make it as a part of our ongoing culture, of our ongoing practices. So I think that continuous integration and delivery processes in general, they are very promotive about balancing and completing security, stability, not to be versus speed, but to promote speed in being able to deliver value in a much more continuous and frequent manner.
Amazing. So we learned about the importance of tools like Argo CD and the cultural alignment within your team. One last question for you, Mark. As you look back on your career and the experiences that have shaped you, what's one thing you've learned about yourself, your team, or your organization that you believe is universally applicable, regardless of the technology, industry, or challenge? And how do you think that insight can help drive growth, innovation, and success in any context?
For me, one key conclusion from my experience of how to integrate security and quality and basically promote the speed if you make it right, if you take it right, is empowering our development teams. At the end of the day, our developers, they are the people that own the code creation, and they own the code quality, and they own the code security. So I think empowering developers to be able for them to understand the impact of the quality issues or security issues, give them the right tools, enable them to use those tools wisely is the key moment for making quality and security to be really an integral part of everything that developers are doing. I think that's the key ingredient of making our own companies much more efficient, because at the end of the day, no matter how strongly we want security or quality to be present, the owners of it, which are developers, should be empowered to do it right. So I think that's the key element of every practice that we may want to introduce in our organizations, empowering our developers.